Hello there and welcome to a brand new week. We're starting this week with 1992 and I am going to be starting the Marvel Crisis Protocol Earth Mightiest Heroes core set. We're going to start with Red Skull, Crossbones and Baron Zemo. First thing we're going to do is tidy up all those areas that the spray missed when I undercoated them with a bit of a bad and black. I'll then give them all a quick once over with a Corvus Black dry brush, just to pick out some very subtle details. Then I'll give them a bit of a harsher dry brush with some Eshin Grey. As I want the blacks to stand out a little bit from each other, I'm going to do a couple of washes on various areas just to sort of deepen the colour ever so slightly. And for Red Skull, I'm going to use some Mechanicus Standard Grey to pick out some of the more finer details and sort of edge highlighting on his jacket. I'm then going to use Mechanicus Standard Grey to pick out some pouches and straps on Crossbones. After that, I'm going to pick out some details with some Dryad Bark, including Red Skull's shirt and his belt. I'll also do Crossbones' gun strap as well. From there, everything we've just painted is going to get a quick wash with Nuln Oil, just to get some recess shading in there. And while that wash is drying, I'll move on to Baron Zemo and I'll start painting the areas that are going to be a pinky purple with Screamer Pink. All of those areas will get washed with a purple wash. I can't remember the name of the colour, but it's the GW purple one. I'll then move back to the brown and give it an edge highlight with a mix of Baneblade Brown and Dryad Bark. Then I'll move on to Crossbones. I will give his pouches a once over with some Mechanicus Standard Grey, and then I'll mix in some Dawnstone just to pick out some edge highlighting. I'll then move back to Baron Zemo. I will do the edge highlighting with a mix of Screamer Pink and a very small amount of white, followed by adding a little bit more white just to pick out some extra details on the mask and on the tip of the scabbards and such. I'll finally add one more dollop of white just to really sort of home in on those extra sort of details and those points on like the mask between the eyes and the cheeks. From there, I'll move on to doing the white details. What I'm going to do is start painting the areas with some grey cere. I prefer to use grey cere as I like the results that we get when we mix in the white and we build it up from there. I'm very quickly running out of time. I've just got enough time to cover Red Skull in some Mephiston red for his skin, and some grey contrast mixed with some contrast medium just to really thin it down, which I'm going to put all over the white areas, including Crossbones' face. And finally, a mid-tone brown wash all over the red areas on Red Skull. And that's it for today. They're mostly done. I'll definitely be finished tomorrow, and then I'll move on to the next batch. Today is 1993, and I'm going to finish off, except the bases, I'm going to finish off painting these three from Marvel Crisis Protocol. I'll also begin work on the next three bad guys from Marvel Crisis Protocol, the Earth's Mightiest Hero core set as well. I'll kick things off by painting Mephiston red again over Red Skull's skin, just to get a better base coat on there. And before I go any further, I'll paint everyone's eyes just to get them out of the way. And again, I always do this now, so if I make any mistakes during the eyes, it's a lot easier to tidy up. Red Skull will then get a highlight of a 50-50 mix of Mephiston red and Evil Sunz Scarlet, just picking out all the details on the fingers and on the brow and the face. And then finally, he'll get a quick dab of Evil Sunz Scarlet here and there, just to extra emphasize those finer details. I'll then move on to painting the white. Once again, I'm going to use the base coat that I originally used, so I'm going to use grey cere to give everything a once over, leaving all the recessed shading that we did yesterday. Then a 50-50 mix of grey cere and skull white, followed by a final highlight of pure white. I'll then start work on Crossbones' flesh. It's just a base coat of Bugman's Glow, followed up with a Reichland Flesh Shade wash. I'll then start work on any gold details that the miniatures have, just to get that out of the way. And while I've got the metallics out, I'll also start the silver as well. Gold will get a wash of Reichland Flesh Shade, while silver gets a wash of Nuln Oil. While that was drying, I painted the Cosmic Cube in Red Skull's hand. I did that by using some Thousand Suns blue. I'll keep mixing in various layers of Temple Guard blue until I'm satisfied it's got a nice bright blue. And then I'll start mixing in little bits of white just to pick out the edge highlights until I finally dip the corners with a pure white. I'm just going to add the base layer again on the gold. I'm not going to give it any highlights, so I don't want it to stand out too much. And to be honest, one coat sometimes is just enough. For the silver, however, I'll quickly do a mix of a darker silver with a lighter silver just to pick out the details on the blade, followed by a quick once over with my brightest silver. I'll then finish off crossbones by using some pure Bugman's Glow, but leaving paint out of the recesses so a shading still sits. That'll be followed up by a 50-50 mix of Bugman's Glow and Canadian Flesh Tone, just to start emphasizing all those muscles and to lighten the skin tone. I'll then mix in some Kislev Flesh just to bring out that sort of muscle tone a little bit more, before finally using Kislev Flesh by itself just to bring out certain areas like the very, very, very edges. With those three finished and out of the way, I'm going to start work on Doc Ock, and I hate painting green. It's going to take at least 2 or 3 layers of moot green to get his green nice and vibrant. And then I'll use a mid-tone silver to paint all of Ultron and the Ultron bots. I've separated the Ultron bots when I stuck together, so that way it'll be a lot easier to paint them now rather than them all one big clump. That'd be an absolute nightmare. I'll then give Ultron and his bots a quick shade with some Bisantalum Grey contrast paint, can't pronounce that, mixed down with some contrast medium. And then I'll wash Doc Ock with some Bieltan, I can't pronounce these words. Yeah. There we have it, first 3 done, just need to be based, but that's not going to take too long whatsoever, and I'm going to do them all together as one big lump. Quite happy with the way they've come out. It's nice to paint these miniatures again, and these guys are well underway. They should be finished, fingers crossed, by Thursday. In the evening, I went ahead and stuck the command units for all the Bretonian foot soldiers. Basically, I want to get them out of the way, and I kind of want to get this all put together by the end of the week. Today is 1994, and I'm going to continue work on these guys from Marvel Crisis Protocol. First thing I'm going to do is get the green out of the way, because I absolutely hate painting green. Now, yesterday I accidentally called this Moot Green. It's not Moot Green, it's Warpstone Glow. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Warpstone Glow to go over and tidy up that wash that we put on yesterday. After that, I'll do a 50-50 mix of Moot Green and Warpstone Glow, and I'll start highlighting the areas and building up that green a lot better. I then added more Moot Green to the mix, so it's kind of a 70-30% ratio, and continued to add the highlights, before finally using Moot Green itself just on its own to do the very tips and the edges. With that horrible green out of the way, I can now move on to the yellow. It's going to be Avalanche Sunset on all the areas that need to be painted, and that'll be followed with a wash of Cassandora Yellow. While that wash dries, I'm going to move on to Ultron and his Ultron bots. I'm going to start things off by giving a dry brush of silver over everything. I'll then add a little bit of lighter silver to the mix and give it everything another once over again with a dry brush, before finally using the lightest silver I have to give it another dry brush so I can pick out all those finer details. I'll then use Wild Rider Red to paint into any of the gaps to represent some form of energy glow that is on the miniatures. And then I'll use Fueguan, really can't pronounce that one, orange wash to put into the recesses just to deepen the colour slightly. That's all I can do today with Ultron, so I move back to Doc Ock now and start working on his yellow. Once again, it's just using Avalanche Sunset to tidy up those details from the wash, which will get highlighted with a mix of Avalanche Sunset and Flash Git's yellow, a 50-50 mix just to start really brightening up the yellow. Then I'll just use Flash Git's yellow itself just to really start highlighting those edges. And then finally I'll throw in some Dawn Yellow into the mix just to do the finer edges of everything. Time has nearly escaped me, so I'm going to use some Steel Legion Drab to start his coat. I'm going to give it a once over. It'll probably need a couple of layers because I'm painting on pure white, and this colour does not cover perfectly through white. But after that, I'm going to use some Army Painter Soft Tone to give the whole coat a once over, and that will be it for today. I didn't get as much done as I want to do today because I'd got a phone call sort of halfway through my allotted time, but I'm happy with the progress and they definitely will be finished tomorrow. In the evening, I also finished off the Bretonian men-at-arms, so they are finally out of the way and now I can crack on with the rest. Today is 1995, and unfortunately I don't have as much time as I want, but I'm going to get as much done on these guys as possible. I'm going to start by finishing off Doc Ock's jacket. It's going to be another layer of Steel Legion Drab just to tidy up that wash. to which I will add some Carrick Stone, a 50-50 mix just to start the highlights. I'll add a little bit more, so I've got a 70-30 mix just to do the corners and very edges. I'll then start his skin. I'll be painting his skin in the exact same way as I did with Crossbones' flesh. So we'll start with Bugman's Glow, and then we'll add a wash of Raglan Flesh Shade. While that dries, I'll add some Corn Red to the Cape of Ultron. And while that dries, I'll continue with the lighting. It's a mix of Fire Dragon Bright and Wild Rider Red, followed up by a tiny little dot of Fire Dragon Bright. I'll then go back to Ultron's cape and I'll paint some Nuln Oil in the recess areas of all the cape. While that's drying, I'll move back to Doc Ock. It's a mix of Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone, followed by just Cadian Flesh Tone by itself, and then a mix of Cadian Flesh Tone and Kislev Flesh. Finally, one bit of Kislev Flesh, and that's him complete. I'm going to move on to the beacon next. I'm going to give it a coat of Thousand Suns Blue, which I'll then mix in some Temple Guard Blue for the first highlight, then just Temple Guard Blue by itself for the second highlight, and then finally some Skull White around the rims of the beaker and any glass so it basically shows up and shines a little bit. I'll then move on to Doc Ock's glasses. I'm just going to give it a coat of black. There's going to be no highlight on there because it's not really necessary, just sometimes one coat is more than enough. I also, at the same time, paint his lenses Corn Red. I'll then mix some Corn Red and some Wazdacker Red to start painting the cloak. I'm just going to be painting the sort of edges. You have to remember with a lot of paints, they will go on one colour and they'll dry slightly darker, so it's always good to bear that in mind when painting things like cloaks. And then I will do Wazdacker Red by itself just to do the final edges of all the cloak. I then went back to Doc Ock and used some Doombill Brown to start painting his hair. And then I went ahead and highlighted his glasses with some Wazdacker Red. Then I used pure white just to add a little dot in the corners to get a sort of reflective surface on the lenses. I gave his hair a wash with some soft tone next. And while that was drying, I went ahead and painted all of his tentacles with some Iron Hand Steel. Nothing fancy for the metal. I'm just going to give it a once over with some Nuln Oil. I finally mixed in a tiny little bit of Gothel Brown to the Doombill just to highlight his hair, which finished off today's work on Doc Ock. I then went ahead and painted these tiny little pieces on Ultron's cloak gold. I then mixed in a tiny little bit of silver to the gold just to give a really small highlight on each piece. So frustratingly, that's all I had time to do today, but they are now complete and all I have to do is work on the bases, so that'll be the first thing I do tomorrow. Throughout the evening as well, I also managed to get together most of the Bretonnian Knights finished, just got 3 more left to do. Today is 1996 and I'm going to finish off these Marvel Crisis Protocol bases. And if I've got enough time as well, I'll start the Marvel Crisis Protocol Wave 5. First thing I'm going to do is put some Mephiston Red on Ultron to represent his like rockets going off. I'll then add some Evil Suns to the mix to make it a little bit brighter. Then just some Evil Suns by itself. I'll then add some Fire Dragon Bright into the mix to make it even more brighter, followed by Fire Dragon Bright just by itself. Then some Flash Gits will be added to the mix, but I'm just going to do the top and the bottom of the blast. Then Flash Gits all by itself. And then finally I'll put a bit of Dawn Yellow in there just to really brighten up and get like the peak brightness, which I'll add to the bottom. I then used some Mechanica Standard Grey to start painting the explosion, but it wasn't dark enough for me, so I decided to change it to Corvus Black instead. I then used some Mechanica Standard Grey just to quickly dry brush the tips, just to highlight them ever so slightly, and then went over them again with a little bit of Dawnstone. After that I started to paint all the metal areas on the rest of the bases with some silver. The pavement was painted with a couple of layers of Dawnstone Grey, which was then given a edge highlight with some Grey Sear. Any rocky outcrops, I went ahead and used a dry brush for that to make it look a little bit more natural. I then went ahead and painted all the rims with Abandoned Black. I then painted some Dryad bark on the underside of the Ultron drones, sort of rocky outcrops to make it look slightly different than just all grey. Lastly, I added some Agrax Earth Shade and some Athonian Camo Shade as well, which I then mixed a little bit of water into, mix and spread liberally all over the base. After that, I only had about 15 minutes left, so I didn't get much time for the Master of the Universe stuff, so I used some orc flesh contrast paint on the green of the areas of the men at arm guards, and a base coat of Nagaroth Night on Fisto's boots, followed by some Druchii Violet just to give it a bit of a shade. And there we have one half of the Marvel Crisis Protocol Earth's Mightiest Heroes box set finished. Pretty happy with the way they've come out. I'm going to finish off the Masters of the Universe Wave 5 set before I continue with the rest of it, though, I think, just for a little bit of a break. I also finally put together the rest of the Bretonian Old World starter set. Only problem is it's really windy in the UK at the moment, so I can't actually spray them up ready for painting. Today is 1997, and I'm going to get a little bit of work done on these guys as I don't have much time because it's Saturday. I'll start by applying another layer of orc flesh on the men at arms guards, just to basically make that colour a little bit more vibrant. I'll then use some Walkstone Glow to neaten things up. Then I'll mix in a little bit of Moot Green just for the first highlight layer, and then just Moot Green on its own as the final highlight. I'll then use some Basalt-Canium Grey to paint the furry, I guess, pants that they wear. I'm going to give it a couple of layers just to really deepen in that grey. While that's drying, I'll mix some Nagaroth Night and some Xerxes Purple to start highlighting Fisto's purple shoes and his belt. After that, it's just Xerxes Purple by itself to brighten the highlight. Then I'll throw a little bit of Slanesh Grey into the mix just to do that final highlight. And that's all I can get done today, sadly, but I'm happy with the results so far, and they shouldn't take too much longer. Today is 1998, and I'm going to continue with Fisto and his mates. First thing I'm going to do is use some Eshin Grey just to pick out some of these tufts on the loincloth, followed by a little bit of Mechanicus Standard Grey just on the tips, and then finally a mix of Mechanicus Standard Grey and Dawnstone just on the very, very, very tips and edges. Before we move to the orange, I'm going to use some matte white to tidy up any of the green that might have spilled over onto the armour. I'm then going to use Gryph-hound Orange contrast paint to start painting in the armour. I'm doing this basically for speed more than anything. While the contrast paint dries, I'm going to start painting Fisto's loincloth with some Dryad bark. Then I'm very carefully going to dry brush a mix of Dryad bark and Gothor brown onto the loincloth, followed by a final dry brush of just Gothor brown. Now the contrast paint should be dry, so I'm going to go onto the orange and use some Fire Dragon Bright just to start highlighting all those plates of armour. I'll then add a little bit of white to the Fire Dragon Bright just to help pick out sort of more of the finer details on the armour. I'll then start working on the skin by using some Bugman's Glow all over the fleshy parts, which will then be given a wash with Reikland Flesh Shade. Sadly, that's all I've got time for today, but they are coming along quite nicely, so I should be able to finish them tomorrow. Pretty happy with this week. We've completed half the Marvel Crisis Protocol core set, and we're well underway with the MotU Battlegrounds Wave 5 as well. As this video also ended up as kind of a paint guide as well, it kind of ended up quite a lot longer, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start doing separate videos for like the paint guides, and this Hobby Streak video is going to be a lot shorter. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Give us a subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.